After Armadillo Phone Cases has prepared its schedule of cash receipts, the amount of cash coming in and when it's arriving, they need to prepare their schedule of cash payments, when they expect cash to go out and at what time it needs to be transferred. To do this, Armadillo needs an estimate of all the things that they're going to have to pay cash for during the fiscal year, and the big component of that is their direct materials purchases. They're building these phone cases themselves. They have their own suppliers, their own vendors that they're constantly buying materials from, which they're going to constantly owe money, and they're going to have to make periodic payments to them for the amount that is being transferred to Armadillo Phone Cases. So a huge portion and the hardest part of a schedule of cash payments is when you are going to pay for your direct materials. But direct materials aren't all that a company is obligated to pay for. They have their total payments for direct labor. They have their total payments for manufacturing overhead. It could be variable, it could be fixed in the form of utilities, insurance, property taxes, etc. They have the payments they have to make for all of their non-manufacturing expenses, their SG&A expenses. Here we have salaries, rent, insurance, and supplies. Payments that they have to make to the federal government for income taxes, and then any payments that they would have for capital expenditures like the purchase of a new piece of equipment or building an addition on a facility or anything that is going to long-term improve the financial prosperity of their business. So all this information, all these numbers have been given in the problem, but where do they come from? Well, on a master budget, there will be a separate schedule for all of these different numbers. So for the total payments for direct labor, up here, where does that come from? The direct labor budget. For all their total payments for manufacturing overhead, where is that number going to come from? It's going to come from the manufacturing overhead budget. All of the payments for their non-manufacturing costs are going to come from their S&A budget. Income taxes is something that's going to be listed into a schedule somewhere, and then capital expenditures, they come from your capital expenditure budget. So all of these numbers which are given in this problem have already come from sub-level budgets that Armadillo Phone Cases accountants have already prepared. But for the sake of simplicity and shortness, they're provided in this particular problem. What we really need to compute for them is when they expect to have to pay for the direct materials they are acquiring for the goods that they produce. And just like on the schedule of cash receipts, we assume that we would start the period with our customers owing us money for sales we made to them. But we can also assume that we're going to start this period with us owing our vendors money for stuff that we've already purchased from them in the past. So in this case, Armadillo Phone Cases has a beginning accounts payable balance of $15,000. So when they are starting the 2019 year, they're assuming they're going to have $15,000 of accounts payable on their books due to their suppliers, which has not yet been paid, which means they're going to have to pay it during the first quarter. So that is our first component of payments for direct materials. After that, we have to make a reasonable estimate of what portion of direct material purchases we expect to pay for during the same quarter that we make the purchase, and what portion we are probably going to push down the road a little bit and pay for during the next quarter. And it says in our information on the side over here that Armadillo expects to pay 70% of all purchases made during a quarter during that same quarter. And the remaining 30% of purchases made for direct materials won't be paid until the following quarter. So in the first quarter, Armadillo Phone Cases is expected to spend $75,750 on direct materials. Well, they expect to pay for 70% of quarter one purchases during the first quarter, which means they expect to pay for 70% of that $75,750. And if we multiply that amount by 0.70, we find out that 70% of their first quarter direct material purchases is $53,025. So during the first quarter in total, Armadillo Phone Cases is expecting to pay $15,000 to their suppliers to pay off any existing debt they had when the period started, plus another $53,025 for materials purchased during the first quarter, which are being paid for during the same quarter of purchase. That's a total of $68,025. Well, Armadillo didn't pay off all of their first quarter purchases. If they paid for 70% of them during the first quarter, if they're expecting to pay for 70% of them during the first quarter, that means they're going to have to pay the remaining 30% during the following quarter, which is the second quarter. So to figure out what portion of the first quarter's direct material purchases we're going to be obligated to still pay for during the second quarter of the year, we just multiply the first quarter purchases times the percent we still owe, which is 30%, so times 0.30. It comes out to $22,725. During the second quarter, we are expecting to have to purchase $75,100 of materials, of which we are going to pay for 70% of those second quarter purchases during the second quarter. So let's multiply that by 0.70. And that tells us that Armadillo Phone Cases is going to pay $52,570 in cash for material purchases which were made during that quarter. And if we add those two numbers together, the $22,725 we're going to have to pay for what is still owed from first quarter purchases, plus the $52,570 we were paying towards our second quarter purchases. It means that Armadillo is expecting to have to transfer $75,295 in cash during the second quarter of 2019 to pay off their material purchases. Same logic we've been doing. We didn't pay for all of our second quarter purchases. We only paid for 70%. We still owe for the remaining 30%. So if we take our second quarter total purchases of $75,100, multiply them by 0.30, we come up with $22,530. That is how much we're going to have to pay off the remaining balance owed to our vendors for materials we purchased during the second quarter. And then during the third quarter, we're planning on purchasing $77,300 worth of direct materials and paying off 70% of that debt during the same quarter we made the purchase. So if we multiply 77,300 times 0.70, come up with $54,110. In all, Armadillo Phone Cases during the third quarter is expecting to pay $22,530 to pay off the remaining debt from second quarter purchases, plus $54,110 for purchases made during the third quarter. That is a total of $76,640. Moving on to the fourth quarter, we need to finish paying off our debt for materials purchased during the third quarter. So we still owe for 30% of the third quarter's purchases. The third quarter purchases were $77,300. Let's pay the remaining 30% that we owe, and 30% of that $77,300 is $23,190. And then, if we take our fourth quarter purchases, which are expected to be $82,600, multiply it by the portion of those credit purchases we expect to pay for during the same quarter that we are purchasing the materials, which is 70%. 70% of $82,600 is $57,820. And if we add those two numbers together, we come up with a total of $81,010. So during the fourth quarter, we have $81,010 worth of cash payments we're going to have to make to our vendors to pay off direct materials which were purchased during that quarter. Well, if we add that to the amount we plan to pay for each of the 3 quarters prior to that, adding all 4 of these numbers in the total payments for direct materials rolled together, we determine that during the period, Armadillo Phone Cases for the year expects to transfer $300,970 in cash related to the purchase of direct materials. They are going to have to transfer cash for the payment of direct labor during the period, and all of those numbers are given to us. $150,500 during the first quarter, $150,000 during the second quarter, $151,000 during the third quarter, $169,000 during the fourth quarter, and in total that is $620,500 in cash payments that Armadillo Phone Cases is going to have to make for direct labor during the year. Those are 2 of our cost components, direct materials and direct labor, the third being our manufacturing overhead. And for our manufacturing overhead, we already are given the portion of that overhead which is variable. It's going to go up or down depending on our production level. And the portion which is fixed are utilities, insurance, and property taxes, which are going to remain the same no matter how much we produce. Well, if that's our 2 different components of manufacturing overhead and we add those 2 numbers together, we come up with our total manufacturing overhead payments for the period. So if we're going to pay $16,555 for variable manufacturing overhead during the first quarter and $6,065 for fixed overhead during the first quarter, that means that in total, Armadillo Phone Cases is going to have to pay $22,620 in cash for their manufacturing overhead payments during the first quarter. And following that same logic, we just add together our variable manufacturing overhead and our fixed utilities, insurance, and property taxes for each quarter to come up with the total. So during the second quarter, that's going to be $22,565. During the third quarter, we'll pay $16,610 for variable, plus $6,065 for the other. That's $22,675 we're going to pay. And during the fourth quarter, our variable manufacturing overhead is increasing as our production greatly increases. We're going to be up to $18,590 in variable manufacturing overhead. We add that to our fixed overhead of $6,065. We come up with $24,655. And in total, for the year, if we add those 4 quarterly expected payments for manufacturing overhead together, we determine that Armadillo Phone Cases is expected to pay $92,515 in cash payments related to manufacturing overhead during the period. Our next component of our schedule of cash payments is how much we have to pay for all of our non-manufacturing costs, which are our selling and administrative costs. So we are given here, they expect salaries expense to administrators and selling staff to be $100,000 each quarter for the year. Rent on their administrative building is expected to be $15,000 each quarter, for the entire year. Their insurance expense on that administrative facility is going to be $6,900 each quarter for the year. And then their supplies expense for quarters 1, 2, and 3 is expected to be $4,455 during the first, second, and third quarter, and then jump to $5,049 during the fourth quarter when they're more busy with holiday sales. We need more supplies to fill out more paperwork. Well, if we add all of those numbers together for each quarter, we get the total expected cash payments for our selling and administrative expenses during that quarter. So if we add up in quarter 1 the $100,000 for salaries expense, the $15,000 for rent expense, the $6,900 for insurance expense, and the $4,455 for supplies expense, that means that in total, Armadillo Phone Cases is expecting to have to transfer $126,355 in cash for their S&A expenses during the first quarter. In the second and third quarter, as we can see, all of the numbers are the same for salaries, rent, insurance, and supplies, which means that the total amount of S&A expenses that we have to pay for during those quarters is going to be the exact same number, $126,355. And during the fourth quarter, we're having a slight increase in our supplies expense. So our supplies expense is going up to $5,049, while the other 3 components, salaries, rent, and insurance, are all staying the same. If we add all those numbers together, small increase for Armadillo Phone Cases. They're going to have a transfer of $126,949 of cash for their S&A expenses during that fourth quarter. And in total, if we add this up, our first quarter plus our second quarter plus our third quarter plus our fourth quarter's total payments for S&A expenses, we come up with $506,014, the total amount of cash this company is expecting to transfer for cash payments related to S&A expenses. And then we are given that Armadillo expects to have to transfer $10,000 each quarter to make their quarterly income tax payment. And they're expected to pay $22,500 each quarter to pay off some form of capital expenditure. So now what we need to figure out are what are their total cash payments before interest is calculated for the company. Well, we have everything they have to pay for. We have their total payments for direct materials, their total payments for direct labor, their total payments for manufacturing overhead, their total payments for S&A, their total payments for income taxes, and their total payments for capital expenditures. All you need to do to find your total cash payments before interest is add up anything that has the line total payments in the beginning. If you add up the whole column, you're going to be counting things twice because you've already figured out the totals of your different cost categories as you're going down the column. So only start with things that say total payments for. So our total payments during the first quarter for direct materials are $68,025. Our total payments for direct labor are $150,500. Our total payments for manufacturing overhead are $22,620. Our total payments for S&A expenses is expected to be $126,355. Our total payments for income taxes is expected to be $10,000, and our total payments for capital expenditures is $22,500. Add all that together, we come up with $400,000. During the second quarter, we are expected to have to transfer cash of $75,295 for payment for direct materials purchased, $150,000 on the dot for direct labor, $22,565 for payments related to manufacturing overhead, $126,355 for payments for S&A expenses, the $10,000 in cash for income taxes, and the $22,500 we are transferring to pay off whatever capital expenditure we made. That comes out to a total of $406,715. And you repeat the same process during the third quarter. Add up anything with the phrase total payments for starting, and you'll find out that they're going to pay $409,170 in cash during the third quarter. And in the fourth quarter, again adding together their payments for direct materials, direct labor, manufacturing overhead, S&A expenses, income taxes, and capital expenditures, Armadillo Phone Cases is going to pay $434,114 in total cash payments during that quarter. And to figure out the total amount of cash payments that you are going to pay during the year, you're going to come up with the sum of your cash payments before interest for each of your 4 quarters. That's going to turn out to be $1,649,999. That is a lot of cash to transfer within 1 year. At the bottom of your schedule of cash payments, you're going to have a slot for your AP balance at the end of the year. What is your accounts payable balance at the end of the year? It's the portion of purchases that you made during the fourth quarter, which you have not yet paid your vendors or the proper parties for. Operating under the assumption that we make all our payments for labor and we make all our payments for manufacturing overhead, etc., well, then our accounts payable is just the amount we're going to owe our suppliers for direct materials when the year ends. Scrolling all the way back up to the top, we made $82,600 worth of total direct material purchases for the quarter. We only paid 70% of those, however. We only paid $57,820 for direct materials purchased in the fourth quarter during that fourth quarter, which means the remaining 30% of that $82,600 has to still be owed to our vendors, which means that's going to be our end of period accounts payable balance. So all we need to do to figure out our accounts payable balance at the end of the 2019 fiscal year is to take the total amount of our fourth quarter direct material purchases of $82,600, multiply it by the percentage of those which we expect to owe when the quarter ends, which is the remaining 30%, and $82,600 times 30% comes out to be $24,780. That is their expected accounts payable balance at the end of the year.